their support networks, offers youth in their support network various opportunities aimed at interrupting the school to prison pipeline that provide hope to the youth we serve when they are facing adversity. Through our partnerships with the Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative, JDAI, CCJ offers mediation services or family group conferencing for youth referred through their school and or school resource officer. Through VORP, we receive referrals from juvenile court and probation for restorative justice between juvenile offenders and victims of crime, with some youth who have been sent to us formally charged, and some who have been sent to us for their charges being diverted upon completion. Through PACT, Promise Academy for Conflict Transformation, youth have the opportunity to take a month-long conflict resolution workshop with us as part of their informal adjustment agreement, which is in lieu of adjudication. And finally, our work with Elkhart Community Schools, we work to implement restorative justice in education practices in an effort to decrease a reliance on punitive measures that historically result in the disproportionate rate at which students of color and students with disabilities are suspended, expelled, and arrested. You'll get a follow-up email and communication about more of our programs in depth. That's just a brief overview. Today, we have the privilege of hearing from an all-star cast of individuals who will talk about the school to prison pipeline from their personal experience. The central question that they will be speaking on is: describe life experiences that you have that have informed your engagement in work that is focused on keeping youth out of prison, and how does your work give you hope? I like to have people tell their own stories, so I'm keep my introduction short. Our keynote speaker is Kempis Songster, a restorative justice practitioner with the Youth Art and Self-Empowerment Project out of Philadelphia. Kempis will be followed by Bryan Hammontree, principal of Elkhart Academy, who is implementing restorative justice with his staff with CCJ consultation. And finally, we have CCJ's latest addition to the family, Kendall Mcgee, co-founder of the Village Community Center. After the speakers finish, we'll have a chance for Q&A. So if you drop questions into the chat, and send them to me directly, I'll be keeping track of those, and then I'll be facilitating that discussion after Kendall wraps up. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Kempis. Emma will put a spotlight on him, and he's going to talk about his journey, his work, and his hopes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Graham. And to all the brothers and sisters on here tonight, peace and light to everyone wherever you are. And thank you very much for having me here and lending your ear this evening. I'm not here, let me just be clear up front, to speak as an expert on anything, and certainly not as a victim. I am speaking from the perspective of someone who was born in Trinidad and Tobago, 1972, immigrated to the US in 1979 at the age of 7 to Brooklyn, New York. 8 years after doing very well in school, running away from home to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, about 250 miles away, with a childhood buddy, joining a gang, and for the next 4 months or so, being holed up in fortified row homes, selling cocaine, out of these homes for this gang. In fact, mostly everyone that was working for this gang was runaway children from all over the world. One fateful night in one of those houses, a tragic and very explosive act of violence took place between the three of us, myself, who would become my co-defendant, the same childhood buddy that I ran away from home with, and someone else that worked in the organization. He was 2 years older than us at the time, but in hindsight, at 17 years old, he was a baby just as well, and himself a runaway. I believe that I was the worst person in the room that night, because I was the one that felt that I had the most to prove, that I had to prove that that I wasn't a chump and that I wasn't a coward and I wasn't a sucker, so to speak. My co-defendant probably would argue differently from his own perspective. But from my perspective, I felt as though I was the most responsible one in that space. I would be sentenced for that crime at the age of 15 to life without parole. In Pennsylvania, mind you, life without parole is not where you do 20 years or 25 years or any number of years and then you're eligible to see the parole board. In Pennsylvania, life without parole means just that, life without parole, and you're sent to prison permanently, effectively to die, which is why perhaps the sentence is more increasingly known throughout the state now as death by incarceration, and not so much as life without parole. For a growing number of people believe that how can any sentence so associated, so as final as death should be called life. And so that was my sentence. And just to preface my conversation here with you all tonight, I just want to say that is why when I say I appreciate being here, that's not just being polite. I'm not just saying something nice. I mean, I appreciate being here from a place that's deeper than many of you might imagine, because I'm not supposed to be here. The only reason I'm here is because of some US Supreme Court rulings that came down, beginning with Miller versus Alabama in 2012, that said that it's unconstitutional to sentence children to mandatory life without parole, followed by Montgomery versus Louisiana in 2016 that said that ruling is retroactive and children who were so sentenced should be resentenced, considering a wide latitude of mitigating factors. And so I was resentenced on July 24th, 2017, made immediately eligible for parole, and released on December 28th, 2017, exactly 30 years and 3 months later at the age of 45. In December this year will be my 4th year home. I've since gotten married, and I now have a son that's 2 years and 7 months old. And so I'm speaking from that perspective, still as someone who has blood on their hands, that 3 decades plus in prison couldn't wash off, and no amount of good that I have done or ever will do will ever be able to wash off, because there is no statutes of limitation on a human life. I'm speaking from that perspective. While in prison, I've sought to regain my humanity and moral rectitude and continue the advocacy that had began in prison, as I learned to advocate for the humanity of others. But over the years, I've seen younger people like myself being marched through the prison gates in orange jumpsuits and shackles and chains with blood-stained hands like myself, and no idea of the hand that's rocking their cradles, and without any clue on how to begin the exploration of accountability for the harm that they cause, right? And over the years, growing and increasingly in regret, right, for the harm that they cause, but having no clue on how to own up to that, right? On how to help bring balance back to where they might have left a family life, a neighborhood, an entire community in a state of imbalance. And so through my studies, I would go on, by the way, to read hundreds and maybe thousands of books behind the prison walls. And on that vigorous and voracious, quest or appetite for knowledge, searching for something to help me make sense of the situation that I found myself in, right? To help me make sense of, what I had done that led me there and what I had done to make me unrecognizable to my own mother. I would encounter teachings of restorative justice, right? Teachings about Ubuntu, teachings about the Gacaca courts of post-genocide Rwanda, teachings about the peacekeeping courts of the Navajo, right? Learning about the concept of Ngwamizin, of the Odipe people, which means to tread lightly on the earth, not necessarily to walk on eggshells, but to appreciate the relationship that we have with the world, with each other, and with the planet, right? And to tread with that kind of respect and that kind of care, right? And it was behind prison walls that I would learn about restorative justice, right? And learn to assess my life and assess the lives of the young people that would come to me for advice and seek my mentorship. It'd be through that lens that I would look at myself and look at them. And I want to be clear too, that when we're talking about violence, the kind of violence that I was in prison for, the ultimate trespass, that violence that is irreversible and irreparable, the kind of violence that so many young people I saw coming into prison for. Value-based judgments about that violence is not going to avail us anything. It's not going to help us get to the root causes of it. It's not going to help us to solve it, right? When we speak about violence, to speak about it in terms of, well, this person is wrong, or this person is bad, or this person is evil, it kind of harkens back to Molière, Jean-Baptiste Poliquin in his piece Molière, where a physician was asked, why does morphine make people sleep? And his response was because of its dormitive principles, right? And when you analyze that response and you look up dormitive principles or the word dormitive, it means sleep inducing. So when he was asked, why does morphine make people sleep? And he said, because of its sleep inducing principles. That's what you would call a tautologous statement. It's saying the same thing twice. And so when we ask, or when we try to dig deeper into this crisis of violence, and we interpret it, right, or we try to explain it with language like, because the people are wrong, or because the people are bad, or because they're prone to violence. Those are value-based tautologous statements. Why are the people violent? Why are their behaviors this way, right? Those are the questions that we need to ask to get down to and understand root causes so that we can get to some solutions. And it reminds me of something that physician Carl Bell said when he said, if a child comes to your clinic for a rat bite and you give the child a tetanus shot and you clean the wound and give the child a tetanus shot and send the child on its way, that might make you a good doctor. But if 3 children come to your clinic for a rat bite and you do all of those things, it might make you a fair doctor. Now, if 100 children come to your clinic for a rat bite and you do all of those things, but then you don't go out into the community to find and eliminate the rat, then you should have your license revoked. And so getting down to and understanding root causes was something that I wanted to plunge myself into behind the walls, because I knew that in my community, right, in inner cities and socially toxic environments, something was biting our children, right? I knew that our children weren't bad, they weren't wrong, right? I knew that the questions that I had to ask was not the same question that the principal asks every time you come into their office facing expulsion. What is wrong with you? It's not the question that the judge will ask the umpteenth time you show up in their courtroom. What is wrong with you? I know the question that we have to ask is, what has happened to you, right? Those are the healing justice questions that we have to ask. And so even with restorative justice, and here I am now as the program manager of Restorative Justice diversion called Healing Futures with the Youth Art and Self-Empowerment Project, where the district attorney is actually turning cases over to me and the team of restorative justice for diversion facilitators that I work with to help bring young people face to face with the people that they've harmed, right? So that they could take accountability for what they've done, apologize for what they've done, and then the community working together to come up with an agreement or a restorative plan for this young person, so that they can appreciate the gravity of what they've done and appreciate their valuable role in the community. Now that I'm in that position, you know, I have to entertain these questions, and I have to take special care not to allow restorative justice in this work that I'm doing to become this new way of fixing our kids. Because I know that our children don't need fixing. What needs fixing is the world that we're bringing them into, right? What needs fixing is ourselves as adults for the kind of examples we're giving them, right? What needs fixing is the society that we're leaving behind for them. We have to make sure that it's one that's conducive to them making better choices, and not one that exacerbates and exploits their vulnerabilities and then condemns them for it. It has to be a society that's not in the age-old business of the 5 insidious P's, as I call them, producing people with problems and then punishing them for it for profit. We can't be in that business. This is not the business of repairing or fixing our children, because what we see in the behaviors of our children is not the problem. What we see in the behaviors in our children is their responses to the problem. And so I also have to understand the limitations of this thing we call restorative justice. And I know that even though I wear it as a title, and even though I believe wholeheartedly in its principles, I know that this is a term that we've been using since the 70s for ways that indigenous people all over the world of all shades and hues have been living for millennia, right? And that we have to find a way to expand the boundaries or the limitations of restorative justice so that it can also address things like trauma, so that it can also address things like poverty and high unemployment rates and child abuse, right? And drug addiction, right? And racism and lack of health care and excessive police force, right? And socially toxic environments, right? I knew that in going into this work, I would have to expand my consciousness, right? And liberate this idea of justice. And this is what restorative justice also means for me, is liberating justice, freeing justice, or the concept of justice from the conceptual frameworks that it's been confined to, the colonial conceptual frameworks that it's been confined to. Because in my mind, justice is not something that's hoarded up in a building somewhere, whether we call it City Hall or the Criminal Justice Center, and then justice gets rationed out to us from this building when we trespass against each other. No, justice is how we, everyday people, meet each other, greet each other, and treat each other. How we create a culture, right, that reduces the likelihood of violent tendencies in our neighborhoods and communities. So it's with this type of consciousness that I enter this work in now. And it's really significant for me and meaningful for me as somebody who had committed the irreparable, most ultimate trespass, just being involved in the taking of a human life, leaving a tear in the fabric of life, a hole in the cosmos that never be fulfilled, to be involved in this work now to help steer other young people away from not only the jaws of the system that has a voracious appetite for their bodies, especially young Black and brown bodies in these inner cities, right? But also to help people who've been harmed to find healing, to help young people who cause harm to get what they need to repair the harm, to help communities receive what it needs to be healthy and whole, and then to help us all find the wherewithal to circle our wagons, right, together and see that those needs are met. To use this program, Healing Futures and Restorative Justice Diversion, not just as a tool to steer young people out of prison or just make sure that they don't get charged, but as a thread to weave our community together. You know, we often hear the quote or the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. And the truth of that statement is not worn out by how much the statement is worn out. The truth is as solid as ever. But there is another African proverb that we don't hear enough or say enough. And that is, when a child is not embraced by the village, he or she will burn it down to feel its warmth, right? And so this work of restorative justice diversion, this work of healing futures, right? This work of not repairing our youth, right? But helping our youth to realize that they are in a community that embraces them, right? To create spaces that that make our youth feel embraced. That is, it's what's most meaningful to me. And the way it intersects for me with education is, you know, I ran away in June of 1987, just a week before I completed the 9th grade. After doing very, very well in school, you know, being in the 90th percentile, right? After being born in an island that always had a 97 to 98% literacy rate. So education was always important in my life, but not to me. It was important because the grown people, my parents and my family and the community around me said that it was important. And in the American context, it was important to me because my mother said it was important. But after a while, the importance of education had started to fade in my mind because of something baleful that started to creep into our neighborhoods, and that was crack cocaine. And crack cocaine changed everything and everyone, whether you did the drug or not. And I never did the drug, but it changed me forever because I sold the drug. And the reason why I sold the drug was because I thought that, one, it would give me a fast track to everything that I was told that education would give me, which is nothing but material things, right? A house, a car, being independent, security, right? All the mysterious accomplishments I started seeing young people my age shining with in 1986, 1987, because of what this baleful thing tempted them and promised them to. That was the first reason. And the second reason was because of the false sense of independence and bravery and rebelliousness that it afforded me, or I thought it afforded me. Had I been given some other tools in the educational curriculum in school, and that other tools were the moral tools, right? The spiritual tools, the human tools, right? Had I been told that education is not just about learning what you needed to learn so that you can get a good job when you grow up, so that you can afford these material things, basically, the American dream. Had I been told also that education is about making socially and environmentally and ecologically responsible decisions, that education is also about looking deeply at what's wrong with the world, what's anti-life with the world, what's anti-human, what's anti-nature about the world, and coming up with ways to fix it. That's what education is about. Had I had Joel Bakan's definition or concept of education, that it's not just about training up young people to fit into the global economy, but also preparing young people to understand this economy, to question and skeptically assess its virtues and weaknesses, right? To have and pursue ideals, and to work against our apparent tendency in certain capacity to be self-destructive, right? These larger jobs of education, had I been given that, when someone came to me with the proposition of a fast track to the American dream, of an express lane to the American dream, I believe I would have been able to say, no, that's self-destructive. No, that's not helping me be an upstanding member of my community. That's not helping me at 15 years old make socially and environmentally and ecologically responsible decisions, right? And I believe that restorative justice offers that. It certainly offered that to me. And I believe that it offers that to young people. And I believe that that is the intersection between restorative justice and education, because it evolves the concept of education into a whole new thing. That education is not just about learning what you needed to learn so that you can fit into the status quo, so that you can have a good job and just afford what you want in life, but learning what you need to learn so that you can be an upstanding member of the community, so that you can make socially and environmentally and ecologically responsible decisions, and so that you can look at the world and see what's out of line with it, what's troublesome about it, what's making life an increasingly miserable affair for so many people about it, and then coming up with ways, or putting your mind and your heart and your spirit together with other people who are coming up with ways to fix it. That is the purpose of education, and that is where it intersects with restorative justice, right? And it's forward-looking and it's forward-moving, right? And so here I am today, and I'll close this out with a prayer that I was given at Yom Kippur, in my first Yom Kippur service, when I was invited to join a panel at the 2019 Yom Kippur service at Central Synagogue, which is one of the main Reform synagogues in the country, in Harlem, New York. And the service that year was about teshuvah, which means, it's a Hebraic concept that means, you know, to return, to repent, to atone. But it was about collective atonement and collective return, collective repentance for collective sins. And the prayer is called a redemption prayer. And a friend that I made that day gave me this prayer, and it seared itself into my memory. And so it's from memory that I give it back to you. And the prayer says, you once lived in chains, beaten by failure and sorrow, your feet sunk in mortar and mud. Then one day, a strong hand gripped yours and pulled you free. You once lived in a prison house, married to your master, afraid at every turn. Then one night, a pillar of fire ignited within you, leading the way out. You once lived in another city, in another country, in a place without choices, until you chose to be free. You carried all you owned to the water's edge on your shoulders, and waters rose on your right and on your left. You once lay bound in a knot of grief, tied tight to a person who could never return, chained to a cloud, until one day you noticed that the cloud had moved behind you, urging you forward, and you turned to face the wind. You were convinced it could never happen. You thought that nothing would change, that your despair would overtake you and drive you into the sea. Then one day, today, you decided to leap forward and you held your breath. And waters rose on your right and on your left, and your feet found dry land. We were redeemed from slavery, and we are grateful for our opportunity to be free. Help us now to embrace our responsibility to redeem others. Inspire us to do our parts in creating a world that's filled with truth, dignity, and justice. And that is the prayer. And so for me, redemption now is not this thing that I have to do. Redemption is something that we all have to do. Redemption is not just for the 2,300,000 or 2.5 million people behind prison walls or people who have done harm. Redemption is something that we all have to do as a society. Thank you so much for your time and for your ear tonight. Again, I appreciate being here.
Thank you. We very much appreciate having you. And now we're going to hear from Bryan, Elkhart's own Bryan Hammontree, who is a principal, and he will speak about, Kempis beautifully tied together restorative justice and education. And now Bryan's going to talk about what restorative justice and education means to him, both personally and professionally, and the work that he's doing with CCJ. So take it away, Bryan.
Thanks. I appreciate just having the opportunity to come here and talk about something that is meaningful to me, I feel passionate about. So Graham mentioned I'm the principal at Elkhart Academy. So for those of you that are unfamiliar, Elkhart Academy is the alternative high school for Elkhart Community Schools. And what alternative education is, I think a lot of people hear that and they might think like, oh, kids that are having behavior issues, they're getting in trouble in class, kick them out, send them to alternative school. Well, I mean, it's bigger than that, at least for me, right? So what alternative education is for me is for students that have a variety of needs that just aren't getting met fully in a traditional setting through no fault of their own. So Elkhart Academy exists to serve those students. So Elkhart Community Schools has the Elkhart Promise, right? So and for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's every student known by name, supported by highly trained, effective staff, and students graduate college, career, life ready. So for me, I feel like Elkhart Academy is the last line of defense for that. We exist to make sure that is true for every single one of Elkhart Community School students. And right now, because we're learning how to do that, we're trying to make sure we have the capacity and the competencies that we need to make sure that's true. And through our partnership with CCJ, Graham, and Alicia, others from their team, they've been helping our staff and our students learn about restorative justice, what it means to have that in our personal relationships, how we communicate with each other, how we treat each other, making sure that everyone's treated with respect. Everyone recognizes that people have inherent dignity and value no matter what, that we have mutual concern for each other. And they also help us kind of big picture integrate those ideas into the systems of the school. So one clear one is, I'm talking about it, interrupting the school to prison pipeline. We know that exclusionary discipline practices aren't effective. And when I say exclusionary, I mean suspensions, expulsions, that type of thing. And that's not just something that just, oh, that sounds right. No, it's true. They've done research. There's empirical data to back that up. As recently as 2019, Harvard did a case study in North Carolina, and they showed that school districts that suspended students at a higher rate, those same students were 20% more likely to be incarcerated as adults. And so that included that continued exclusion from society exacerbates the problems that were there in the first place. So rather than supporting people and helping them, we're creating bigger problems for ourselves, and it has a real impact on people's lives. So CCJ is helping us look at, how we do school, and we're kind of scrapping a lot of stuff, and we're changing things, creating it from the ground up on how we write our discipline policies at school, how we schedule classes, how we structure our meetings. So nothing's, everything's on the table. Let's talk about it. Let's look at it. How can we make it better for the benefit of all people? And so what connects me to this work is not just seeing the fruit. We've been working with them for about 18 months, give or take, right now. So we're really starting to see some of the fruits of that labor coming into being, but also something that connects me to this work on a pretty deep level is my own personal story. First of all, I want to thank Kempis for being vulnerable and just sharing his story with us. That was powerful, and I appreciate that. I like hearing people talk about how this work is meaningful to them. It motivates me. It helps create like a connected community, I think, when we hear stories of other people, because the details of my story are different. But I think like at its core, I have found like I'm not unique, I'm not special, like in the sense that like, oh, nothing, or that what this world has thrown at me is so much harder or difficult than anyone else. No, like at our core, we have the same needs, right? I have the basic human needs like food, water, shelter, that sort of thing. But we all have a need for community. We all have a need for self-esteem and connection and purpose. And growing up here in Elkhart, I was, I don't know, like Kempis described, I was a good student for the first part of my educational career. I got good grades. I went to school. I went home to a family that met all my basic needs. I never had to worry about where my next meal was coming from. But there were circumstances, there were experiences that were traumatic in my life, pretty significant. And that trauma created harm, or that caused harm that really impacted me. And I had some unmet needs because of that. I also had a lot of missing skills because of that, like things like self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills. I did not know how to do those things. And I didn't know how to communicate it. And it started to come out in behaviors at school. And that led to suspensions. And it ultimately led to me being referred to the alternative school, which was the life program now. Now it's the Elkhart Academy, which is where I work. So full circle, kind of cool. I get to work at a place that made an impact on my life. Unfortunately, I had the level of need that I had, Elkhart or life at the time, they weren't able to meet it, and I wasn't really participating in the programming. So those behaviors carried outside of school, landed me in some trouble. I spent time at a residential facility, and for about 2 years, I spent time where the focus was punitive, right? So the logic behind that was, if I'm punished, right, and pain is inflicted on me enough, then I won't want that pain. So I'll stop doing those things that they don't want me to do. Well, that approach maybe temporarily stopped those behaviors, but I didn't have those needs met. I didn't build any skills. And so when I transitioned home, and there wasn't much of a transition, it was just one day I was there, one day I was back here. And they said, good luck. So when I got here, I still had those unmet needs. I still had unresolved trauma. I still had missing skills. And I didn't know how to be a member of our community. And I didn't know how to cope with that. So I turned to drugs and alcohol, and I developed a pretty serious substance abuse problem. And that started to manifest itself into criminal behavior, landed me in trouble. And now I'm in the criminal justice system, which again is excluding me from our community, from society, and I'm not getting the support that I need. I'm communicating through my behavior that I need something. And instead of having that support and accountability combined together, it's addressed punitively. And it's just creating more problems. I'm causing harm, harm's being caused to me, and nothing's getting better. So I don't have a ton of time, so I'll kind of fast track this. So you're probably wondering, like, okay, well, what happened, right? Well, a lot happened from then till now. And one thing that I feel is important for me to say is I entered into a system that was designed by people that look like me, for people that look like me. And I had access to resources that a lot of my peers who were communicating through their behavior, the very same behaviors, communicating those needs, they did not have equitable access to those resources. So where a lot of my friends ended up in prison, I had some extra opportunities and some extra resources afforded to me through through my privilege, basically. And I benefited from that because it gave me additional opportunities to experience relationships and programming that introduced me to the principles of restorative justice, that introduced me to that provided accountability and support at the same time, and introduced me to the ideas that I deserve respect. I also should return that respect to others, that everyone, including myself, and I definitely didn't believe this, all people have value and deserve dignity. And that it's important as a community that we have concern for each other. If we live that way, right? I liked how Kempis had that like analogy of treading lightly on the earth, right? If we do that, life can be so much more peaceful. And that's a way of life that I'm discovering, and I don't want to give that up. I don't want to live without that. And I found that in order to keep that for myself, I have to give it away. So how do I do that? How do I give away those things that I'm learning? How do I help understand how to repair the harm that I've caused? And that's ongoing and probably work that will never finish, and that's okay, right? And then also to recognize, the harm that was done to me, address that trauma, learn those skills that I need to be self-aware, socially aware, have healthy relationships, and start meeting those higher level needs like sense of community, sense of purpose, self-esteem. And so where I'm at today is I'm in a unique position, right? So I didn't think I would find myself in this position, but when I applied for Elkhart Community Schools, I knew like I wanted to be at Elkhart Academy, right? Because the students that I have the opportunity to work with are a lot like me, and some of their stories that, like I said, the details are different, but they echo. The same needs are there for them. They were there for me, and they're still here for me today. So how can we, in partnership with our community, like partners like CCJ, build the skills we need as a staff and students together as a community? How can we build those skills so that we can transform that and interrupt that pipeline, right? Because the trajectory of my life was going one of two places: prison or death, right? And that was interrupted through relationships with people and programs and programming that took the ideas of restorative justice and made them real to me. So I want to be able to do that. And real quick, I'll tell a quick story because I think about this a lot. I had this history professor. He calls into class one day or end of the semester. He's like, "Here's your exam. It's one question." I was like, "Yes, one question. All right. All I got to do is answer this one question." I knew there was going to be a catch. It's going to be something crazy. And he said, ideas, individuals, and institutions, rank them in order of importance, how they impacted history as we've studied this past semester. So, I thought about it, wrote my paper, turned it in. He contacts me the next day. He's like, "I need to talk to you about your paper." I said, "Oh, I messed up. I gave the wrong answer. I didn't." He said, "No, you didn't give the wrong answer. You just gave an unusual one. I ranked ideas first." He said, "Normally it's either individuals or institutions." He's like, "Explain a little, go a little deeper. Tell me why." And I think this like really connects to what Kempis was talking about, like a cultural shift is what we need. Because individuals and institutions can drive ideas, but ultimately those ideas will leave a legacy that's intergenerational. Like that, the ideas that we can leave for the next group of leaders through, the work that we do at the school, through the work that I'm sure your organizations are doing as well. It could leave a legacy that could change how institutions are designed in the future, that could change how individuals treat each other. It could create a cultural shift that can benefit everyone. So if we have an eye towards equity, I think that we need to look at what ideas are we promoting in our personal relationships and our professional relationships. How are we impacting the institutions we serve, and injecting these ideas of restorative justice? Because if we do that, like those big issues that that we're facing, not just as a nation but globally, that's how we address them, and that's how we can address them long term. So the ideas of restorative justice, I mean, they changed the direction of my life. They're a big part of changing the direction of my life. So if I can pass that on through my relationships, through my relationship with my family, my friends, my neighbors, and at work, and then help create a system where at school kids can feel safe, they can feel like they belong, they can learn the skills that restorative justice teaches them, and they can pass that along. I think that's work that's bigger than me, and I'm grateful to be a part of it. So I appreciate you guys giving me the time, letting me talk. So I'll pass it back to you, Graham. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Bryan. Yeah, thank you for your input, both on your personal story and on how that affects your work and the change that you're bringing and the work that you're doing with us. Thank you. I see Kempis co-signing on that. And then last but not least, we have Kendall Mcgee, who is representing the Village, CCJ's newest partner. So Emma, without further ado, let's go to Kendall to talk about his personal experience and the work he's doing with kids in Elkhart. Welcome.
Hey, Graham, what's going on, everybody? How y'all doing? Y'all hear me?
Coming in
Y'all
loud
hear
and
me
clear.
good?
You're good.
Okay, well, where do I start? Give you a brief backdrop of who I am. I am Kendall Mcgee. I am 42 years young. Born and raised here in Elkhart, Indiana. This is a touchy subject because not only have I been in the system since 1989, I am still in the system as we speak. What I found is once you get in it, it's hard to get out. It's easy to get out when you got the right influences, or even with the right motivation, coupled with the right influences, you can begin to climb up out of it. I've been doing everything grassroots. So I used to get in trouble in school because it was boring to me. School was boring, so I used to act out, cuss the teacher out because I felt like as if she wasn't teaching me anything. It wasn't interesting anymore to me. I guess first time I went to prison, I was 17 years old, turning 18. Went to prison 6-7 times. When I went to boys' school for 2 years at one time, and boys' school didn't allow you to earn that many credits. So I was going into the 9th grade. By the time I got out of boys' school, my class would have been in the 11th. So I went on and got my GED, which that was in September 1996. I think I still have it. I got a award for scoring the highest ever in the boys' school on the GED test. So I went on and I tried to go to the military, but that didn't work. I went to ITT Tech for computer-aided drafting. That didn't work. It was the street life. My influences were the drug dealers, the murderers, the guys that hung in the streets. Those were my influences because my mom was a drug addict. Pretty much everyone in my family was a drug addict. So in order for me to feel accepted by my family or the peers in my community at that time, I felt as if I had to sell drugs in order to fit in. I became violent. Learned different ways to channel my. I'm not gonna say channel my anger, to hide my fears, and that acted out in violence because I was scared. I landed myself in prison for a series of small individual bits. But I never forgot to continue to educate myself. But I knew it was something missing. But when I went to prison for 16 years, I did 8.5 years in prison. And I had a wake-up call. I was at the age of, I think, 30, 31, something. July 22nd, 2012, I decided that it was time to wake up. I walked out of my cell to go back in my cell and never come back out and recreate with none of the inmates ever again. I began to start working on myself. God allowed me to see my life moment by moment. He stripped it down to me. Show me where I learned these learned behaviors. Show me how he put the proper people in my life to help me correct these. I'm talking about affirmed males, men who have came across the threshold to manhood, and they was on a mission to begin to show other men how to acquire these things that we so need to become the head of household, the men that, you know, our community desire. So I ran into a man named Pastor Martin Thomas. He taught me everything I know about leadership. He taught me, he taught us everything. I ended up, under his tutelage, I ended up building a mentoring program for the guys in prison, which they still use to this day. I was released January 21st of 2016. I had mentored over 200 men. I was a liaison for 3,500 men because I wanted to help. I wanted to help the people, and it wasn't just for the inmates or the guys in there. I was an advocate for right or wrong. I've always stood there, because one thing Pastor Thomas instilled in us is integrity is everything. So that, first and foremost, I would never compromise for anyone or nothing like that. I go on to sit in there, and I was thinking, okay, so what happens when we get out? I built this mentoring program for inside the walls. What happens for when we get out? I get out. I built a reentry program that never seen the day of light, because I had lost my 19-year-old son 6 months of me being out, and I slipped into a state of depression, which it took me a couple of years to get up out of. He left me with 3 grandchildren whom I have to take care of, which, you know, is hard daily. And I ended up going back to prison for DUI. So when I went back behind the walls, I met a global organization called Alternative Violence Project. And I met some great people. Unbeknownst to me, they were doing this voluntarily, and it was out the kindness of their heart. It was not getting paid. And they have a network that is in 55 countries and in 33 states. I went on to become one of their top facilitators, which today we just finished the training today as well. Now, this Alternative Violence Project is a hands-on experiential conflict resolution workshop. And it's in these workshops, man, you begin to connect deeply with people that you never would thought that you had connections with ever in life. They laugh, we cry, you know, we share things that we wouldn't ordinarily share, you know, with people whom we say that are close to us. but here we are sharing uncanny things with strangers. It's not a classroom setting, you know, the participants get it. And in this, I found something that was worth living for. So I get out. In there, I had wrote a program. I get out, and I was just saying, I help mess up these streets, so it's time to help me. It's time for me to help clean them up in any way, fashion, or form. Now, I had believed that the old way wasn't working. The old, come here, young blood, let me sit down and talk to you. Or, come here, young lady, let me talk to you. It doesn't. We've been doing that for years. I wanted to build something that was different, that was influential in and of itself. So we needed, I got the research in all these different cities and states. We have these programs called violence interruption programs. And here it is in Elkhart, Indiana, in our community, we have an influx of youth violence and or, you know, it goes up, you know, the murder rate. I've lost, since I've been home from prison, I've lost 7 of my friends, childhood buddies, due to gun violence. So we decide that it's time to take the streets back on our own. Now, I figure that we can build a place where a boy could be a boy, a girl could be a girl, which we had got that concept from Lifeline. Irv Pope was he was a mentor, he was a friend to us. He was everything to us. And you know, coming from boys from out of Middlebury apartments, and Irv Pope pull up in the Lifeline van and grab us and just he didn't even talk at us or down to us. He would have a conversation with us and ask us how we been, feed us, and drop us back off. That meant something to us, that stuck with us. So we wanted to recreate that. We want to do things differently. My life experiences is thriving me, keeping me going, because I know what it was like when my mom having multiple men in the house on drugs. I know what it's like not to have nothing to eat. I know what it's like to go to school with no haircut, hand-me-downs, stinking shoes. I know what it's like to, you know, be sleeping on the floor or even sleeping in a prison cell. I know what it's like to not have no one in your corner. So I felt like I had a story to tell, and we was gonna take a non-traditional approach. So we decided to build the village. The village community center is, like I said, a place where a boy can be a boy, a girl can be a girl, a man and woman can be a man or a woman, where we want to unify families again, because I believe wholeheartedly that our communities and the world is in disarray because the man is out of his rightful position as head of household. That's my full belief. So I believe that if we don't start connecting with affirmed males, if we don't start connecting with role models and or mentors and start getting these characteristics, these traits that we so need, and we need to start instilling them and recreating them in other individuals, that we're going to continue to go down on a downward spiral. Now, with the concept of everything, we get a group of affirmed males, and we get a group of youth and or broken parents, and get them inside these interactive workshops. It will be our influence that will begin to rub off on them, and they will begin to start inquiring about how to obtain these characteristics that we have. Because we could preach until we blue in our face, but until they want it, they ain't gonna never get it. They have to want it, and it don't matter who it is, they have to want it. And with that armed in my mind, you know, I have to strategically be cautious, be aware, and be cunning about how I get them the information that they need to be to transform their lives. One of the men spoke earlier about a shifting. That's all we need is a slight shift. That's all we need is a slight shift in the right direction, a slight shift. And when the concept, when we said it takes a village, it's about 40 some of y'all on this call. We all are the village. We all are the village. And you all are doing a great work in the village. And me and Damon, we want to bring the essence of all that to the people, because I would never go anywhere. I probably wouldn't have never met no one, because I felt out of place, or I felt as if I didn't fit, or I don't have the right vernacular, or I don't look like you, or I don't, act like you. So that puts me in the state of inferiority, to where I mean, you know what I'm saying, to where I feel like I said, I don't belong. One of my stories I tell, I've been in the work one building twice, and I'm 42 years old. One time I've been when I was 18 looking for a job. The other time I've been last year trying to get some unemployment money. But because I felt uncomfortable. But if we can get these resources and put them in the people's face, just like, bam, here you go. Listen, they have no choice but to conform. If everybody around, if we change the culture around us, then they have no choice but to conform or get out. That's just that. And we don't even have to say that. All we have to do is just change, because the message is for the people who want it. And that's just what we own. Today, we just had a graduating class of 17 trained facilitators who are now officially violence interrupters. We plan to do a host of things. All of them come from various different backgrounds, walks of life, different, just different demographics and all that, but it works together. And I'm the only one that has been from the school to prison, pipeline, and is the work that I do is very rewarding, because just to see the smile on a person's face when you help them out, or just to be able to wipe a tear, or even give somebody a hug. Just like a couple weeks ago, man, I hugged a police officer for the first time in my life, which was weird. I hugged him, and he cried, because he was about a month ago, he was in our class, and he cried because he was like, man, he said, I would think that you would be mad or upset about it. And I'm like, no, I'm not upset or mad, man. We human. We human beings, man. And we in here for the same cause. We trying to help. We trying to save the streets. I don't care if you got on a badge or you in blue. I look at you, a man, and you my friend, like that. I just wish early on in my life that I had people like, that would show me, that would have showed us, because the generation before me, they were, took over by the crack epidemic. And the only thing they could show us was how to get money. How they showed us survival. And we did whatever we had to do to survive, whether if it was petty drugs, larceny, robberies, or whatever it was, we had to get by. That's what we did. And when we started getting locked up in the droves, that created a generation gap. So now it skipped over a generation, because the generation up under me is really lost, because we couldn't teach them how to be the firm male or firm female. So it skipped over, and now the generation up under them has become lawless. And we wreck our brains every day trying to figure out how to take our communities back, or how to take our people back, just because everybody is just, we kind of get clueless at times, but we figuring it out. I believe, with these talks and these things, man, we begin to realize that it's not until we unify as leaders, as organizations, as, you know, as a school, the churches, as, you know, even the city officials. It's not until we unify that we can that we can't get the people to unify. If we can, yeah, we can save 5 over here or maybe 10 over here, but think what happens when we create a wall of unity and we begin to the leaders begin to recreate themselves in someone else. Now you just recreated another leader instead of one Kempis or one Irwin or, you know, one Bryan. What if we had 4 or 5 of you guys, and just think of the greater impact that we begin to make versus the impact that we're making, you know what I'm saying, being cautious, because I feel like until we unify, we can't capture these, can't stop these youth from going to Elkhart East and West to the Elkhart Academy, to boys' school, prison, or whatever. And it's not until they understand that they're gonna rush them there. We fighting a battle that we may not win for another 20, 30 years. But I'm Kendall Mcgee, man. And, it's an honor and pleasure of being on this call with you, men and women.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, all 3 of you, for talking about your experience, what brought you to the work you're doing, and what gives you hope. So we're going to do a couple questions for the Q&A. Kempis had mentioned early on rethinking the way that we work with youth, not about fixing them, but thinking about the question of what happened to you. And so the first question that I have is, was with Kempis in mind, but I think it's good to throw it to all of you, which is, how do we get entire staff on board if we're a youth serving program that asks that question of what happened to you? What does that look like in terms of getting staff on board? Because we are used to a different paradigm. And then how do we get that ball rolling in terms of making that work?
You said what?
Yeah, just how do we make sure that the question of what happened to you becomes a sort of a living way of being in our respective organizations?
I think we got to ask that to the the staff too. Like, it's not, I mean, if you don't ask it to the staff first, you're not going to be able to have the staff ask to the students. So we got to take care of the staff as well as the students at the same time.
Thank you. Yeah, Kendall, did you want to jump in?
No, go ahead. He said it perfectly.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, Kempis, what are your thoughts on the what happened to you question and how to make sure that is developed with staff?
Yeah, no doubt. And thank you for that question, Graham. I just how we institutionalize that mindset and turn it into a best practice for us is definitely going to be, should be a point of concentration for us moving forward, and a challenge. And the way in the program, in the Restorative Justice diversion program that we're running here at YASP, the way we do it is by first, we challenge the conceptual frameworks that we enter the work with, right? And one of the things we address is our language in the way we talk to the young people, right? Because language are born from perceptions and they promote certain perceptions, right? So we definitely don't refer to the young person as young offender, or certainly not juvenile. And this is not just something to gloss over, because language is indispensable to this work. And even though I'm called a juvenile lifer, you know what I'm saying? I definitely reject the term juvenile. I don't like the term juvenile because I know that it's a legal term devoid of any humanity. I know that we don't call our own children juvenile. I know that even when our own children do something bad, You don't get on the phone and talk to another relative or another family and say, this damn juvenile got on my nerves. You say this child got on my damn nerves, so no matter what wrong your child does, you never lose sight of the fact that you're talking about a child. So juvenile is only that's a term that we use when we're talking about other people's children. And that's what juvenile means. It means other children. It's another way of otherizing them. And so that's one of the things I address, and that we address, when we're talking to our young people in our diversion program. We don't even have a sense of them as if they're anything other than our own children. All children are our children. That's the mindset for us. You know what I'm saying? And so I believe that addressing that, first and foremost, our conceptual frameworks, our perception, is one of the ways we begin to internalize. We have to start internalizing this idea that first, our children are more than the labels that we heap upon them, and they're also greater than the acts that they might be, the act that they might be referred to this diversion act for. All right. I had one young person say, I know what I'm going through this program for, but it's really overwhelming when every time we sit down to talk, we're just talking about this harm that I did. I'm more than this harm that I did. I'm a good person. You know what I'm saying? And I had to really I had to sit with that for a minute, because even though this restorative justice diversion program is about diverting these young people from being charged, every time we meet with them, we don't necessarily have to lead or even make the meeting about the act. You understand what I'm saying? Because quite surely their self-accusing spirit, you know what I'm saying, is getting louder and louder with the increased consciousness every week from these you know what I'm saying? So they don't need my voice. They're already kicking their own selves in their behind. They don't need another foot from me. You know what I'm saying? And so and some of these young people, in addition to the fact that they're laboring under the natural deficit of reasoning that characterizes childhood, right? They're doing this in socially toxic environments. You understand what I'm saying? Heavily gentrified environments, right? Gun violence, lack of, an opportunity, disappearing recreation centers, you know what I'm saying? And all kinds of converging negativities on them, right? And so it's kind of like Father Greg Boyle said, and this is something, again, staff needs to internalize, like, look, the concept of awe as a principle of what makes as an ingredient or component of a healthy community or a healthy staff. Awe, to be in awe of the burdens that young people have to carry, as opposed to being in judgment about how they carry those burdens, right? That is something. So it all starts with the conceptual frameworks and the mindset and the spirit that we bring to the work. We can get into all kind of technical and practically applicable, you know what I'm saying? All kind of nuts and bolts and concrete things and so on and so forth. But it has to start with our minds and our hearts and our spirits, going to the school to prison pipeline. I hope we don't believe that the school to prison pipeline began with the implementation of metal detectors and increased police presence in the school, because if we believe that, then that implies that with the removal of those things, we will have effectively began the dismantling of the school to prison pipeline. Now, I would argue that the school to prison pipeline has been in effect, and our children have been flushed through that pipeline since schools existed in this country. When Malcolm X, when his 8th grade teacher when he told his 8th grade teacher that he wanted to be a lawyer, and his 8th grade teacher told him that, no, you can't be a lawyer. You need to be something else. He was effectively flushed down the school to prison pipeline. And that's where he ended up. And so I say all that to say, and not to sound discursive, because it's all connected, right? That it begins with the way we first imagine and see our young people, and then the way we greet them, meet them, and treat them, right? as a staff. You know, we have to change the way we think about our young people and the way we talk to our young people or about our young people. We have to check the language that we use, and we have to use language that don't carve our young people out of the human family, but that confers humanity and dignity on them in spite of what they've done, whatever they've done. All right. Just to close with this, if you treat people as if they already are all that they can be, then they'll become all that they can be. But if you treat them as they are, then they'll remain as they are.
I certainly appreciate that. That's why the PACT program, we had such intentionality of calling Promise Academy for Conflict Transformation, so that kids aren't being treated as at risk and labeled that way, so that we acknowledge their promise right off the bat. And it's a month-long program. We only spend an hour or one session of that time really talking about what they did. The rest of it is about their promise and their potential. So I appreciate the point about language, because that's so important. I think that's probably all the time we have for questions. We're going to go to Erwin, because I'm sure everybody on the call is also anxious to hear about, we've heard about what CCJ is doing and what our guests have done. Erwin's going to talk about what everybody on this call can do to also be an interrupter in the school to prison pipeline. So I turn it to Erwin for that conversation. Oh.
Erwin, you're saying some great things, but we can't hear you yet. You're on mute.
I think there needs to be a big button that says unmute. You just touched the screen. You know, I want to say that we are surrounded by a powerful group of individuals, literally seated at this table. Now, when we came up with the title, Messages of Hope, Interrupting the School to Prison Pipeline, it sounded good. But that wasn't all we wanted. We wanted the excitement of hope, the reality of progress, and the challenge of the present and the future. And I want to emphasize this: there is no future without the living reality of the present, and we get to determine that even now. When I looked at the word hope, and I looked it up and then looked at it as in a noun, the form of a noun, it says the feeling that what is wanted can be had, or that events will turn out for the best. But when we use it as a verb, it says to feel that something desired may happen. We've all joined this particular session this evening, and I want to thank each of our speakers. I want to thank each individual who chose to invest their time here. We, as with every day, stand at the crossroads of yesterday and tomorrow. We are literally living in between the two states, whether in terms of consciousness or unconsciousness. And what will continue to happen with the work we do, I want us all to hear this. We are not experts on anything. The only thing we're experts on is learning how to live with others in relationship. And we take that and use that for the benefit of others. We add the RJ practices and principles, theories, and all of these different things. But nothing matters without a positive heart, without a desire to be selfless, without a desire to step up when things don't look as if they're ever going to go right. At CCJ, we continue to push through as far as the challenges of doing this work. We literally are going against the grain of how our communities, our society has been taught to think about others, the social other who has broken the rules, however bad that break might seem to each and every one of us. The work we're doing is helping to build and move beyond the shame that is appended to those who fall through the cracks, who jump over the wall, fall through the cracks, or are run over on the tracks. Our work is difficult at best. Sometimes it feels hopeless, but I want to add that our emotions have no common sense. They can tell us something is right or wrong, but it has no common sense. We have to take those decisions. And as I say this, I'm inviting you to make a decision about what you want this work to look like. Do we want it to continue? Do we want it to continue in its present form? We are constantly reinventing, not the wheel, but the processes and the way we do what we do, particularly because of who we're working with and for. This evening, one of our biggest projects is, I just want to share with you, is we are looking to help individuals mentor young men and women. We are looking for support so that we can help train you to become the best kind of support you can be. We want to train you with conflict coaching and basically how do you relate to someone who's not been to jail? Many of us may never have been to jail, but that doesn't mean that we don't have the capacity to empathize and to support the other. Our target, our goal is $3,000 and we're going to be using that money to provide the training, the materials, and the time. Because everything we do takes time. You know, like you say, you're going to build a car, you see it moving piece to piece to piece on television. Not so when you're dealing with human beings. So our target is $3,000. And if you take your phones out right now, do like me, take up your telephone, your cell phones, open the text message and open a new blank text message, type 707070 to donate any amount you choose to. And you type in the word in the text of itself, school, which is SCHOOL, the number 2 and the letter P, and you will get a text back that allows you to click a link and go and donate to us directly. Our target is $3,000. Now we know some may be able to give more than others, but there's multiple things. And as I wrap this up this evening, because we know your time is valuable and we're intentional about valuing your time, you will receive a follow-up email that will have a booklet which will cover all of the principles that we've talked about this evening. And you will have the opportunity to check some of the links out that are in the booklet so you can go and see some of the videos, et cetera, okay? You will have the links there for you. And last but not least, I want to thank each and every person who turned up. We are not doing easy stuff. We're doing the stuff that costs us something. Each one of you are giving in ways that we cannot even imagine. But I want to say to you, have hope, be strong, because we are in this together, because we are fighting not just for our community, but for our people. Thank you very, very, very much, everyone, because our people includes everybody, and that's who we are at CCJ. It doesn't matter whatever you believe or don't believe. If you need the help, we are here and we will receive you. Thank you very much. Again, let me remind you, type the number, text to 707070, and in the body of your text, you then add school, which is SCHOOL, the number 2 and the letter P to donate. And we want to thank you in advance for all that you're doing and how you're supporting us. Thank you very much. Over to Graham.
Yeah, Erwin, can you just remind the good people on this call how CCJ is going to put that money to use?
Sorry, that money will be used to help with mentoring, for training, particularly in the areas of conflict coaching, on recognizing conflict, listening, developing empathy. These are all things which are used and talked about in the community, okay? In the world of business, we have always been doing this. Now we're making it available to everybody. And this is how you can participate. That's just one of the ways you can participate. Thank you. Back to you, Graham.
Yes, thank you. Just to clarify, that money goes again to doing one-on-one mentoring with youth, to doing circle process with groups of youth that have been referred to us that have gone through mentorship. We're also going to be developing online classes for youth. We, of course, want to make sure we get youth before they have to be referred to us. We want to work with youth proactively. And so we're doing a number of new things in terms of intentionality behind mentoring and things like that. We will also, in your follow-up email, get information about how you can sign up to be a mentor, and also how you can refer kids to us. So we're looking at 3 things: interrupting the school to prison pipeline by becoming a mentor, interrupting by referring us, and interrupting by doing coaching and work with that, and referring other people. If you want to refer other adults who you think would be good as well. So combination of referring, training, and actual mentorship. So appreciate that very much.
Have a good evening, everyone. And the donate link will be open until Friday. So you can continue to give. The recording will be up by tomorrow evening, and you can share this with anyone you so desire. Thank you very much. And again, have a great evening. Bye.